Hi guys, welcome to the story of Cattle, the sun god. So looking at our timeline, we have just finished with Scylla and Charybdis. And if you remember correctly, Scylla and Charybdis were two terrible mystical monsters. There was Charybdis, which was the whirlpool. I remember that because Caribbean and Charybdis, water places. And it would suck stuff down and hold it down there underwater for a long time and then spurt it all back out. Not ideal. Then you had Scylla, which is like your six-headed beast that lived on the cliffs. And Scylla took 6 of their men and ate them, but because their mouths were full, Odysseus and his men could get through. I forgot to ask at the end of that, and I threw it in the description, but just in case you didn't get that part, I did want to note to you guys that in your chart, I would definitely include what are some good and bad leadership skills we see from Odysseus here, because we do see both. There are some good things for good reasons and some bad things because they're done for bad reasons. So let me know what you guys think. So we are now, finally, we've only heard about it for like the past 5 books, hearing about Helios and his golden cattle. Boom. So we're going to listen along, and then I'll kind of pause as we go. I have my text. I hope you do too. I'm on page 585 in the actual textbook. If you're online and just keep scrolling with it, it'll be great. Better. Okay, here we go.
The cattle of the sun god. In the small hours of the 3rd watch, when stars that shone out in the first dusk of evening had gone down to their setting, a giant wind blew from heaven, and clouds driven by Zeus shrouded land and sea in a night of storm. So, just as dawn with fingertips of rose touched the windy world, we dragged our ship to cover in a grotto, a sea cave where nymphs had chairs of rock and sanded floors. I mustered all the crew and said, "Old shipmates, our stores are in the ship's hold, food and drink. The cattle here are not for our provision, or we pay dearly for it. Fierce the god is who cherishes these heifers and these sheep, Helios, and no man avoids his eye."
So they are on the island of Helios, who is the sun god. No man avoids his eye because the sun's, always in the sky. He does tell his men they've got these storms, so they're pushed into a sea cave to kind of like wait out the storms. And he says, "All right, guys, we have food, we have drink, we have everything we need. We cannot leave this boat and go eat Helios's cattle and sheep because we will pay dearly for it." And I always have this debate with students, like some students, like, I don't know if he was really honest there. Like he definitely could have been more upfront, like you will die. And sometimes students say, I mean, you will pay dearly for it. That's pretty obvious that like something really bad is going to happen. So, what do you guys think? Do you think that that's actually him telling the truth or not? I'd love to know. So he's like, we have to stay, we have to push through. And here's what they say back.
To this, my fighters nodded. Yes. But now we had a month of onshore gales, blowing day in, day out, south winds or south by east. As long as bread and good red wine remained to keep the men up and appease their craving, they would not touch the cattle. But in the end, when all the barley in the ship was gone, hunger drove them to scour the wild shore with angling hooks for fishes and seafowl, whatever fell into their hands, and lean days wore their bellies thin. The storms continued. So one day, I withdrew to the interior to pray the gods in solitude for hope that one might show me some way of salvation.
All right, so to clarify, in case you missed it, I'm on line 844. We had a month of onshore gales blowing day in, day out. So he told us, we can't leave here until the storms are gone, and we can't go eat Helios's cattle. But they are stuck for a whole month waiting for these storms to end. And at that point, you have to know, like a month long of storms, there's no break. That's something deemed by the gods. So this is some kind of test. So it's not going well. They get really thin and they're really, hungry. And they've left to go get fish and like try and go fishing, and that's fine. But they had lean days and wore their bellies thin. So the storms continued, and now we have Odysseus. He's inside, like the inner part of his ship, and he is praying to the gods, saying, "Gods, please help us. We need help to get out of this," and wanting some kind of salvation.
Slipping away, I struck across the island to a sheltered spot out of the driving gale. I washed my hands there and made supplication to the gods who own Olympus, all the gods. But they, for answer, only closed my eyes under slow drops of sleep.
So he's like, I'm going to go pray to the gods. And so he goes there, he cleans his hands to make sure it's like a proper gift to them. And he gives, sorry, hold on. Supplication, which is just like nourishment and stuff. So like, food or wine or really whatever they had left. He gave that to every god on Mount Olympus. Any of them, like any gods, please help me. I'm giving this to you. Please help my men get off this island. He tries to provide it to all of the gods. And how they repay him is, for answer, they only closed my eyes under slow drops of sleep. So now he's gone to go make the sacrifice and try and claim that they need help, which they do. And he's asleep.
Now on the shore, Eurylochus made his insidious plea. Comrades, he said, you've gone through everything. Listen to what I say. All deaths are hateful to us mortal wretches, but famine is the most pitiful, the worst end that a man can come to.
So we're hearing back from our super duper foil, Eurylochus. Eurylochus, or how he says it in here, Eurylochus, I don't know. I go with Eurylochus. And he is calling to his fellow shipmates, which remember, there's only like 15 of them plus Eurylochus left. Comrades, you've gone through everything. Listen to what I say. All deaths are hateful, but famine is the most pitiful, the worst end a man can come to. So he says, I know we have faced terrible things and we're going to face more terrible things, but the worst thing we could die from is famine. And I think the reason behind this is it's no glorious death. It's not, dying while in battle or on these far shores. It's dying from starvation. And so it's a long, slow process. And so I think Eurylochus's mindset is, why would we die of famine, especially when there is food sources and we could prevent that? But we're not going to because Odysseus said not to. So you can really see how they're turning into foils in this scenario as well. We have Odysseus who's trying to do right by the gods, and he makes sacrifice to them and gives them supplications. And then there's Eurylochus who says, you know what? We're going to die anyways, but the worst way to die would be from starvation. Let's fix that. So you definitely should probably talk about something in your packet about Eurylochus and Odysseus being foils yet again.
Will you fight it? Come, we'll cut out the noblest of these cattle for sacrifice to the gods who own the sky. And once at home in the old country of Ithaca, if ever that day comes, we'll build a costly temple and adorn it with every beauty for the Lord of Noon. But if he flares up over his heifers lost, wishing our ship destroyed, and if the gods make cause with him, why, then I say, better open your lungs to a big sea once for all than waste to skin and bones on a lonely island.
So, Eurylochus is saying, you need to help fight this starvation, fight this hunger. His plan is, we will cut out the noblest of the cattle, so the best of the cattle, and sacrifice them to the gods. So, yeah, Helios doesn't want us messing with his cows, but we'll kill some and sacrifice to him and the other gods. Isn't that way better? Then he says, once we're home, if ever that day comes, we'll build a beautiful temple and adorn it for every beauty for the Lord of Noon. And that's the epithet of Helios, Lord of Noon. He has a couple. But Eurylochus is pretty rational. He's like, you know what? If he does get mad at us and he does kill us, I'd rather die. I'd rather die by opening your lungs to a big sea once for all than to waste to skin and bones on a lonely island. So he's like, I'd rather, have my ship wrecked and drown than have to die by starvation because it takes too long. And all the crewmates are like, yes, you're so right. And so here's what they say.
Thus Eurylochus. And they murmured, aye, trooping away at once to round up heifers. Now that day tranquil cattle with broad brows were grazing near, and soon the men drew up around their chosen beasts in ceremony. They plucked the leaves that shone on a tall oak, having no barley meal, to strew the victims, performed the prayers and ritual, knifed the kine and flayed each carcass, cutting thigh bones free to wrap in double folds of fat. These offerings, with strips of meat, were laid upon the fire. Then, as they had no wine, they made libation with clear spring water, broiling the entrails first. And when the bones were burnt and tripes shared, they spitted the carved meat.
So they all agree. And so, I don't have my little whatever nearby, it's fine. So they take the cows and they don't even have any barley to give them, so they put down leaves to try and entice them. And as the kine, or the cattle, come nearer, they pick out the best looking one, knifed it, and flayed the carcass, like to open it up to get things. The thigh bones they made as the offering, because that's like the meatiest, juiciest part, I guess. And they double wrapped it in fat, and put it upon the fire. And then normally you give wine to the gods, but they didn't even have wine. So they used some spring water that was there literally in a stream. And they're like, this is the best that we can do, gods. Here you go. So they gave them thigh bones and spring water and entrails that were also boiled in the water to make it, I guess, like an entrail soup. So just as they finish carving the meat, Odysseus wakes up.
Just then my slumber left me in a rush. My eyes opened, and I went down the seaward path. No sooner had I caught sight of our black hull than savory odors of burnt fat eddied around me. Grief took hold of me, and I cried aloud, "O Father Zeus and gods in bliss forever, you made me sleep away this day of mischief. O cruel drowsing in the evil hour. Here they sat, and a great work they contrived." Lampetia, in her long gown, meanwhile, had borne swift word to the overlord of noon. They have...
So Odysseus is obviously angry. He calls out saying, how could you? And then Lampetia, who is a nymph, as we can see from our side notes, went to go give a word to the overlord of noon, or the lord of noon, or Helios. By the way, all of this that he's hearing about, like what the gods and goddesses said, he was later told to by Calypso, because, she's there. And so he heard all of this later on her island, because remember, chronologically, he hasn't been there yet, but in the storytelling, he's just recounting his story to us.
You are kind. And the Lord Helios burst into angry speech amid the immortals. "Oh, Father Zeus and gods in bliss forever, punish Odysseus's men. So overweening now, they have killed my peaceful kine, my joy at morning when I climbed the sky of stars, and evening when I bore westward from heaven. Restitution or penalty they shall pay, and pay in full, or I go down forever to light the dead men in the underworld."
So here's where we really see why his men get punished. Obviously, they ate the cows, but Lord Helios says that you need to destroy his men for doing that to my cattle, my little precious little baby cattle. And he's like, every morning when I was, rising in the sky, I could see the little cows below, and I was like, oh, my little baby cattle, you're doing so wonderful. And we continue on in his path to be the sun. So Helios says, you need to make them pay, or I will go down forever to light the dead men in the underworld. So basically, Helios threatening, if you don't, I'll leave this world and I'll go to the underworld, and there'll be a sun down there and you'll have no sun, which would not go well.
Then Zeus, who drives the storm cloud, made reply. "Peace, Helios. Shine on among the gods. Shine over mortals in the fields of grain. Let me throw down one white-hot bolt and make splinters of their ship in the wine-dark sea." Calypso later told me of this exchange, as she declared that Hermes had told her. Well, when I reached the sea cave in the ship, I faced each man and had it up. But where could any remedy be found? There was none. The silken beeves of Helios were dead. The gods, moreover, made queer signs appear. Cowhides began to crawl, and beef, both raw and roasted, lowed like kine upon the spits.
So, this is one of those word uses that it's changed meaning over time. So in this sense, on line 926, the use of queer is an older use, and it just means unusual. So these unusual signs began to appear that the gods sent to let them know, hey, you done messed up. So they had obviously taken the hide off the cow, because you could use that for leather and stuff. And so the hide was just like on the ground, laying out in the sun basically to dry, which kind of messed up Lord Helios has to look at his dead cows. But the hide started moving on the land and crawling itself away, and that would be freaky. And then as there's putting their meat on the spit to make it cook so they could have something to eat, because remember they're trying to fight starvation, all the meat starts going moo, moo, which I wouldn't be able to eat that personally, because that would mess me up mentally. So these weird omens are what keeps happening, and it's basically the gods' way of saying, hey, you guys messed up, so prepare to face your doom.
Now 6 full days my gallant crew could feast upon the prime beef they had marked for slaughter from Helios's herd, and Zeus, the son of Cronus, added one fine morning. All the gales had ceased, blown out, and with an offshore breeze we launched again. stepping the mast and sail to make for the open sea. Astern of us, the island coastline faded, and no land showed anywhere, but only sea and heaven. When Zeus Cronion piled a thunderhead above the ship while gloom spread on the ocean. We held our course, but briefly. Then the squall struck whining from the west, with gale force, breaking both forestays, and the mast came toppling aft along the ship's length, so the running rigging showered into the bilge. On the afterdeck, the mast had hit the steersman a slant blow, bashing the skull in, knocking him overside, as the brave soul fled the body like a diver. With crack on crack of thunder, Zeus let fly a bolt against the ship, a direct hit, so that she bucked, in reeking fumes of sulfur, and all the men were flung into the sea. They came up round the wreck, bobbing a while like petrels on the waves. No more seafaring homeward for these, no sweet day of return. The god had turned his face from them.
So, we remember, like Tiresias had said, if you guys don't touch the cattle, you'll all be able to go home safely. However, if your men touch the cattle, they will all die and perish and will not get to go home. And that's what we're seeing happen here. Basically, Zeus throws down lightning bolts. The ships get destroyed. After one ship, 16 dudes. The ship gets destroyed. They're all dead. And who was our lone survivor? It's Odysseus.
I clambered fore and aft my hulk until a comber split her keel from ribs, and the big timber floated free. The mast, too, broke away. A backstay floated dangling from it, stout rawhide rope, and I used this for lashing mast and keel together. These I straddled, riding the frightful storm.
So that's how he makes his raft to kind of escape the situation in the storm, is he builds a raft so he doesn't drown, and he just floats on top of it.
Nor had I yet seen the worst of it, for now the west wind dropped and a southeast gale came on. One more twist of the knife, taking me north again, straight for Charybdis. All that night I drifted, and in the sunrise, sure enough, I lay off Scylla Mountain and Charybdis Deep. There, as the whirlpool drank the tide, a billow tossed me, and I sprang for the great fig tree, catching on like a bat under a bough. Nowhere had I to stand, no way of climbing, the root and bole being far below, and far above my head the branches and their leaves massed, overshadowing Charybdis pool. But I clung grimly, thinking my mast and keel would come back to the surface when she spouted.
All right, so I gotta go back to the board for a second. So give me 30 seconds, I'm gonna disappear. So many things. Count down slowly from 30, and I'll be ready. Trust me, you'd rather me do this than y'all like see motion sickness from me trying to move this around. Hey, like magic, we're back. I'm gonna turn up the lights to make it a little bit easier again. Okay, so we can kind of see again. So, as you guys know, he has, this already happened, we're done with that. So we're back with our lovely Scylla map. And so, need more colors. This time, Odysseus is coming back and from this direction, and he only has like one little raft all to himself. We'll make him be purple because why not? Royalty color. So there's Odysseus chilling on his raft. I know it's not the best drawing, but we're living with it. So he approaches back to Scylla and Charybdis, and he sees that, and he knows that, and he's like, oh my gosh, this is not going to go well. Because remember, if he goes down Charybdis, he's going to die because it holds everything down in the bottom for a very long time until you can't breathe anymore, and like everyone's really dead. And then it spews stuff back up, and it's all broken because rocks. And then there's Scylla, who has 6 heads. Now, before he sacrificed 6 men to get to go over, but they are done with that. They are hungry. And so there's one of him and 6 heads. It's not looking great. So he gets lucky a little bit, and he also has this plan to kind of like help him out. So I am looking. Hold on, gotta make it. Oh my gosh, so many things. Hold on. We're surviving. We're figuring things out. All right, in my book, I am on line like 968, We got Scylla Mountain and Charybdis Deep. There, the whirlpool darkened the tide. I sprang for the great fig tree, catching on like a bat under a bough. So, remember I said there was like a little strait over here and there's no way his big boat could have fit through here? Well, now it's perfect for him. So, a very lovely tree. We're doing great. You'll get to enjoy more of my drawing later, don't worry. I have colors. I don't really know how to draw a fig tree. This is what we got. So as his raft goes forward, it's starting to get sucked into Charybdis. So when his raft is here, he jumps to the tree branch that he definitely couldn't have gotten to before because of his big boat. But so then, as he says, he hangs basically like a bat from his lovely tree branch. Oh, we love messy markers. So he's forced to hang from his tree branch, and his boat, or his like raft, gets swallowed down into Charybdis. So it's down here at the bottom, yeah? All right, then at line 975, I clung grimly, thinking my mast and keel would come back to the surface where she spatted. So like he like waiting here. He's like, eventually it's gonna have to come back up, and then I can jump on board and I can continue going.
And how long, with what desire I waited, till at the twilight hour, when one who hears and judges pleas in the marketplace all day between contentious men goes home to supper, the long poles at last reared from the sea. Now I let go with hands and feet, plunging straight into the foam beside the timbers, pulled astride, and rowed hard with my hands to pass by Scylla. Never could I have passed her, had not the Father of gods and men this time kept me from her eyes. Once through the strait, 9 days I drifted in the open sea.
So basically, he's forced to wait, left to wait there. And at the twilight hour, one who hears judges pleas in the marketplace all day, being contentious men, goes home to supper, the long poles last reared from the sea. So finally, he's literally hanging from the branch all day. And finally, it comes back up, his little raft. And so he jumps onto his raft, and he starts like paddling with his hands because that's literally all he has. And he's lucky because he says the gods help him. And he sneakily makes it past Charybdis without getting sucked down himself. And Scylla doesn't see him because the gods are on his side and helping him. So he's on the sea for 9 days.
I made shore, buoyed up by the gods upon Ogygia Isle. The dangerous nymph Calypso lives and sings there in her beauty, and she received me, loved me.
Checkers.
But why tell the same tale that I told last night in hall to you and to your lady? Those adventures made a long evening, and I do not hold with tiresome repetition of a story.
Which, dude, you just repeated yourself like 10 times. But yay, we did it. Okay, so that is officially the end of part 1. Let's go back and look at our map. So that way, I'm sorry, not our map, our timeline, just so I can make sure we all feel good about this. Okay, if we remember, we started reading on Calypso's island. That's where we came into the story because our story starts in medias res, meaning in the middle. Then he finally leaves after being on Calypso's island for 7 years as her not entirely unwilling captive. He winds up on Alcinous's court, and they have to be nice to him because of Grecian culture, and he has to be good to guests. And so finally, like, hey, what are you doing here? And that's when we hear all of this story. So he starts with their battle in Ismaros, and they leave because his men don't listen to him. Then they get to the Lotus Eaters, and the men do kind of listen to him. They face up with Cyclops, where he's a little bit selfish. Bag of Winds, where, oh yeah, guess what? They don't listen to him. Lastrygonians, everyone has to listen because they're cannibals, and that's pretty serious. Then we have Circe, the sea witch, and like, you know, they kind of get into their own trouble. He has to go down to the underworld and get the prophecy from Tiresias saying, don't eat the cows. If no one eats the cows, you guys get to go home. But if not, all your men will die. Then when they come back up, Circe's like, yeah, he didn't tell you everything. So sirens, you can't listen to this song. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard, but don't listen to it. Then Scylla and Charybdis. Scylla has 6 heads because Scylla has 6 letters, and Charybdis is Caribbean and it's water. So he makes it through them. He has to sacrifice 6 men. This one, he's down to 16. And then they get stuck for a month on Helios's island, like in a cave, because they can't eat the cows. Then they do, because Eurylochus is the foil, and Eurylochus says, yes, we must eat the cows. We need to survive. And you definitely should analyze how that makes them foils in this moment, because Odysseus has definitely changed at least a little bit and become a better leader and a better person. So how is Eurylochus showing that Odysseus is a good leader or is not, if you think he's not? So then he escapes off Helios. He actually ends up going back to Scylla and Charybdis to sail back through Scylla and Charybdis. And then for 9 days, he's floating on the raft. And he gets out on Calypso's island for 7 years. And that's when he's there for 7 years. And then he goes to King Alcinous's court. But he's like, oh, I can't repeat myself. I already told the story. I know. It's a very long story, but we did it. That's part 1. And then for part 2, we get to hear about him and his return home. Huzzah! You guys will have your part 1 quiz, if not the same day as reading this, then like the next class period. It'll be great. Bye, guys.